I'm Stefan Baumann, and welcome to episode 8 of the Baumann Effect. Doing these videos has been absolutely extraordinary and fascinating to hear all the information that I'm getting from all of you out there in YouTube. And if you wish to contribute a question or two, please feel free to put a comment down below and I'll get to it in a future episode. And be sure to press the subscribe button so that you can be updated on every new Baumann Effect that is posted. Today I have a wonderful conversation that I will be sharing with you. It's about varnishing, but this time about how to go about truly varnishing your painting. There's certain methods that I like to use, and believe me, knowing these will save you a lot of time. We also really delve into the conversation about focal points. What is a focal point and how does it work when it's a lighting effect? And at the end, we talk about edges, what to look for, why we have edges, and we'll just start beginning to have that conversation. Of course, so many of these conversations link in together. I promise you we'll be painting more in the future, but right now we have to get the conversation and the language together so that we can learn from each other. So sit back and relax and enjoy episode 8 of the Baumann Effect. All right. So we talked a little bit about doing the paints, and did you understand basically the difference between the oils and acrylics? Did we?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Demonstration.
Okay, so you got that answer, and then the dimmer varnish, we got that taken care of.
Yes.
You can use dimmer varnish all the
It's
time.
not super thick or.
No, I put it on thick.
Oh, okay.
You
Now-
meant paint, right? Not about the paint or the varnish.
Well,
Wait, do you put, what kind of varnish you put on acrylics?
At the end?
I don't remember the name of it, but it,
It's like a Krylon.
no, I don't remember the name of it.
Yeah. So here's my thing with varnishing. Since we're talking a little bit about it, and you guys should know this. So let's just say it's a finished painting, and I've waited a couple weeks, and I always like spray varnish, a rattle can.
Is that what you do at the end for all your paintings?
Oh yeah, yeah. And you don't have to varnish your paintings.
No.
Nowadays, the reason why you varnish your paintings is because it makes them look shiny or not. Unifies the brush strokes. Sometimes it gives a little bit better reflection on the surface. So when you have matte varnish and you have glossy varnish and people go, so Stefan, tell me the secret. What do you like? Glossy or matte? And I go, oh, I love gloss. That's my thing. I roll with gloss. And people will turn around and go, oh, I hate gloss. It's too glossy. It's like, oh. God, how can you, when you buy a car, do you want a matte car or do you want a car that glistens? Yeah, when you go to the museum, all of those paintings are glowing light. And a lot of people don't put varnishes on their paintings, which is perfectly fine because they don't want the gloss at all. We call them the non-glassers. So,
Does it provide a sense of protection for the surface?
well, in the olden days it did, because when you think about back then, they had coal fireplaces, they smoked, they cooked inside, so they had that mess, and so it was just quite common that you would put a protective layer on your painting, and it would be removable. So dimmer varnish you can remelt. Dimmer varnish is made out of crystals, dimmer crystals, and rectified turpentine, and you go and get these crystals up in Canada, and they're just sap tears, and you put them in a jar and you add rectified turpentine, and you just keep twirling that for like 3 weeks over the crystals, and eventually all the crystals dissolve. So it's important to kind of know that, because if you want to take your varnish off, the dimmer varnish off, you have to get that. That's a melting product. So you can actually put rectified turpentine on it and melt it away. It's not feasible, or I wouldn't recommend if you're going to do it on your own if you want to renovate it. But sometimes when students varnish a painting, they make a mistake or there's a little glop that falls on it. You can actually kind of put rectified turpentine on it and remelt the crystals again. But, you know, back in the olden days, paints were very susceptible to all the smokes and stuff back then. And so you had to have a varnish that was removable. Which brings to another thing, is that back in the day when paintings were popular in the Victorian era, you also had wallpaper. And there was a company out then that would make this kind of doughy product that you would put on your wallpaper to clean off the soot off of that. I mean, we don't really know how bad it was. There's a book written by Nancy Russell, the wife of Charlie Russell. And when she was coming out to Montana from New York, she took a train. And back then the trains went 25 miles an hour and they were steam engines that were heated with coal. And back then they thought that if you went 25 miles an hour for any particular time, your body would die. You know, it was unhealthy to travel at those great speeds. But they would travel and there was no air conditioning, so everybody in the trains would have their windows open as they're going through the prairies. And then you have the train up there going with all that smoke, and all that coal smoke would go into the train. You never hear about that, but they would come out like raccoons, you know, with basically just soot. That was just the nature of traveling in a train. So that was the unromantic part of it. But coal was a really big thing, and they burned it in the houses and stuff. And so there was a product that came out that you would press onto your wallpaper to clean the soot off your wallpaper. And after, you know, we stopped using coal to heat our houses and stuff, this company said, "Oh my God, we're going broke. Nobody's buying our product anymore. What could we do with it?" And one guy said, "I know. Let's cut it up in small pieces, put it in an egg and call it silly putty and make a toy out of it." So silly putty actually used to be a product that people would buy to clean wallpaper. So when you put it on, you know how they said when you put it on and you could peel off newspapers you get? That's what you would do with your walls. You would peel off the soot. And that's why it has that sticky property. But all this useless facts. Anyway, so here you are, my painting's done, it's a masterpiece. And oftentimes at this point, not this painting, this is just a demo, but at this point, you know, you go to varnish it. Now, the problem is at this point, you're going to take a big risk. If you varnish it, you could destroy it. So listen well, oil painters. First thing, go shiny, because shiny is best. It just looks more finished. Then you rattle that can. And little paintings I usually hold, but bigger paintings I put down on the ground on a day that is not windy. And you put newspaper down, and get that the newspaper, well, if there was no wind, the moment you spray, a little bit of wind will show up, and the corner of that newspaper will go right on top of your painting. And it's crucial to be prepared for all these things ahead of time, because what I'm going to tell you now requires complete concentration. And you can't have any quick disasters. You've got to make sure your dogs are tied up so they don't run across it. You got to make sure there's not like a lot of bugs, no wind. Make sure that your newspapers are down. You get one of the rattle can, and I prefer the rattle can because you can actually put more product down and you get a better job. But most artists, what they do is they go shh, 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 shh. That's their first layer.
And that's even enough?
No.
No.
Those are people who don't watch the Baumann Effect.
I didn't watch that one.
In the Baumann Effect, you get to learn how to do this, okay? So you spray your can and make sure it's nice and and make sure you kind of spray it upside down to kind of get any clogs or anything out of it. And then you're ready to spray. Now when you spray, when you go little S's and stuff, you let it dry. You say, well, I'll catch it the second time. When you spray it the second time, it's just going to make the little S area show up, but even more shinier than the one before. And no matter what you do, you can never get rid of that first layer. That little psh right there will show up to the very end. You are screwed. So pay attention. So what you do is you spray, and usually I do this with short sleeves and I got hairy arms. Usually the hair on my arms start to get like all clunky. If it's on the floor, you don't have that problem, but I go shh, this way, 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 shh, this way. And I literally, very carefully and methodically, evenly empty out half the can, or a quarter of the can.
That much on there?
Yeah, because you need that much to level it out. The whole idea, the mistake that people do with Derma Varnish is that you need to put so much on so that it just becomes like a thick layer, as if you just laid it on real thick. And you've got a lot of turpentine in that product, so as you're spraying it, a lot of it is lifting out into the air and a lot of it is evaporating. So not that much product is going on, and you just kind of put it on, and you 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 spray. And then you the entire time you want to look at the reflection. And it's at this point where, if you've got burn umber, which is notorious, that gets kind of dry and flaky, that burn umber area, you might have to go back over it. You want to keep kind of going and working into that color on that initial finish, so that that gets as shiny as the rest of it, so that before you put this can down, it is thick, it is level, there's no shinier spots than others, and you fix everything so that it's almost like perfect. You can dump almost a half a can.
So you do it all in one fell swoop?
You do it in all fell swoop, not little tiny thin layers. That's where the people do the mistake. Then what you do, you breathe in, because that's more opportunity for turpentine to get a little high. Okay, so no, don't breathe in the fumes, because that is rectified turpentine. That's the stuff that gets you sick. Okay, so a little bit is not going to hurt you, but you know, it does stink. Okay, so then you got your thing here. Now this is so wet and thick, and if you go like this, it will actually start to run. So you've got to make sure it's absolutely, so you pick it up off the floor, and the thing is, you want to make sure that your dogs don't get in it, hair doesn't get in it, and you very carefully like this. And it's harder to do this when you got a big canvas, because I'll do a 30 by 40 the same way, and you walk it into your house, and you put it on a counter somewhere where you know nothing's going to touch it for about 3 or 4 hours. You leave the room, no traffic. I put it in my entry hall, and you let it sit for 3 or 4 hours. And then it still be kind of sticky, but you can turn it vertical and put it somewhere in your studio so it's not going to run anymore. But chances are you can almost nail a varnish in one time if you get it really thick. But if you don't get it thick enough, it starts to become a problem, and then you've got bigger problems. So you could take a really great masterpiece and absolutely destroy it when you varnish it. And it's really hard, even if you're melting the dimmer varnish, it's really hard to do that. That requires somebody that really has a lot of patience and the right kind of cloths and stuff to fix some of those mistakes. So it's really crucial. Painting from life is really the secret behind really mastering painting. And you can practice painting from life, and then later on when you're a big time painter, you can work from photographs, but your style is kind of developed. You kind of want to cut your teeth with painting from life. That just works better. And you have no influence of the photograph. It's just like you said, it's just you just kind of look at it and try to figure it out. What were you thinking? So when we're doing the Baumann Effect, there's part of that is our 12 or now 14 keys. And the 14 keys, it's about how to put together a composition. And we're not going to be talking about doing that because we need a few more props, but we'll do that in the future here shortly. But one of the keys is a focal point, a strong focal point. And why do we need a focal point?
Gosh, your eye.
So where's your focal point in the painting?
Well, I'm sorry you said that word because I see now that there is one. I suppose it should be where the highlight is on the rim. I mean, not the rim, but the base, maybe. That
You mean
would
like
be my-
here?
Yeah, that's too low for a focal point.
Do you happen to know some of the elements of what a focal point is?
It's in the, not necessarily in the middle, but in that sort of golden third.
So somewhere in the middle third.
Yeah.
Yeah, so some people call it the golden mean. So you have the golden mean, which basically is the law of thirds, but more refined. And the law of thirds is just a third, a third, a third, a third, a third, a third, and then it would be in the middle. So this is not really falling into that center focal point. And you have to know these things. Have you ever heard about focal points in paintings?
Yeah.
And you know that the
Through
focal...
your videos, and I watched your video on Golden Mean.
I love you. Thank you. Because you watched that, you know, I was able to buy a gumball. Not even. If you watched 4 or 5 videos, I probably got a gumball. Yeah, so if you did that. But okay, so the focal point is the key. That's how we see. And people go, oh, Stefan, you know, it's like you're so anal about all the things you have. I just want to paint. But the reality is that, you know, when you go driving around and you're in your brain, you're not looking at anything, that's kind of painting a painting with no focal point. And the focal point is that moment when you go, hey, look at that. Now, if you're in a gallery and you've got all these paintings of just wimpy, pretty flowers and desert scenes and abstracts, and there's no focal point, it's like driving through a park and not thinking. You know, just drive and you're thinking about taxes because nothing pops. But when you have the focal point, it's the thing that catches your eye. And that's what causes the brain to focus. That's the thing that said, aha, I'm looking at something different. Now, a lot of times when you go into a gallery, this happened to me, I don't know if it happened to you, but I'm just assuming galleries can be very kind of awe. You know, it's like you're kind of fearful sometimes. You open up a gallery and you kind of peek in and look around the gallery to see if it's worth going to see. Some of you will walk up to the window and kind of look through and go, is this a gallery for me? And pretty much within a few seconds, you've already determined, let's move on. Does that happen?
Yeah.
Yeah. Even museums, you know, if you walk through museums, it's like I went to the Uffizi Museum in Italy, and the first 4 floors, you start off with early medieval art. And it's like medieval art, medieval art, medieval art. I mean, the first top 3 floors that you start off with, oh my God, there's just so much religious crap up there that you just like, and it's just, you know, one battle scene after another and stuff. No focal points, no perspective, I mean, I was just like, oh man, I was worn out.
You were ready to get out.
Yeah, and then like halfway through the museum, they have the Renaissance. And now we're starting to see, you know, Venus in a half shell, and these beautiful paintings are starting. The Medicis are starting to influence the work, and you're starting to see, wow, you know. And they start putting in. You have Caravaggio coming up, and they start seeing these center focal points, and you get really excited. You know, it's just you see the difference between before and after. And they found the light. You look at Caravaggio, you look at Raphael, you look at these artists at the time, Rembrandt, and you go, oh my God, what were they thinking? For 1,300 years, it was just this drabby, flat, nothing painting, no perspective, no center focal point. Everything was illustrated, you know, with paintings of Jesus and Mary and a bunch of people on crosses and stuff, but no light. And then in the Renaissance, it's like, wow, they discovered light. And the paintings started to get light on them. And the artists that learned to turn their light on through their paintings, they become masters. And you know them. You know Caravaggio. You know Rembrandt. And you know these other artists that worked with light. In fact, the Impressionists went in and just said, let's just try to recreate what light is. And so they took it up another notch. But it is the light, and it's that center focal point. So the center focal point should be an effect of light. It should be in the middle of our view. So when I'm looking at you, I'd be talking to you. When I look at Sue, see how I turn my head? I'm looking at you. When I'm looking at you, I'm no longer looking at you. It'd be weird if I was talking to you and looking at her, and you would sense it.
Where could a focal point be that would be more appropriate?
Well, it has to be somewhere in the middle third.
I know, but what would you choose? I don't know why I don't get it, because it's transparent, so that's the problem. If it's transparent, how can it be a focal point? Because you're looking through the thing at the band ring.
The focal point, and here's one of the exercises I do with the coaching. So I'm going to give you 2 ice cream cones, a chocolate and a vanilla. Choose one. Choose one.
What, me?
Yeah.
Oh, I would pick chocolate.
Chocolate. Why did you choose chocolate?
Because I'm thinking of the flavor. I don't know.
Wrong answer.
Right.
Chocolate and vanilla. Choose.
Vanilla, because it's lighter.
No.
Okay. I don't know.
That's the wrong answer. Give me another. Chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate.
Why did you choose chocolate?
Because I love chocolate.
Wrong answer. Chocolate, vanilla.
I'd actually go with vanilla.
Vanilla. Why did you choose vanilla?
I like the flavor of vanilla.
Wrong
I
answer.
would love it if it was dipped in chocolate. With that
There you go.
chocolate crust.
I'm actually a chocolate vanilla fiend. I like the swirl.
Yeah.
Too much of one thing is usually wonderful, except when it comes to chocolate and vanilla. I like it balanced. Chocolate. But that's the wrong answer anyway. So try to do it with me. Ask me. Hold out your hands and say,
All right, which would you like, chocolate or vanilla?
I choose chocolate.
Why? Okay.
Then you say, why did you choose chocolate?
Yeah. Or why did you choose this one?
Why do you choose chocolate?
I just chose it. I didn't have a reason. I just chose it. You don't have to have a reason. So you said, well, what would you do? How would you choose your center focal point? It's like, well, there's a few things that you kind of think about, but you know it's going to be somewhere in the middle, and it's got to be an effective light. And you could choose it here, 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 and whatever you choose, it's okay. There's no wrong answer in that. You just choose it, and then you work towards that choice.
Okay.
So your central focal point's anywhere where you choose, and you justify it by what you do with it, but there doesn't have to be a prerequisite to it. You just choose it and then you make it happen. And so where this happened is that you didn't choose your focal point first, which is crucial. You got to have a central focal point first, because that is the foundation. That's the thing. When somebody looks into the gallery, you want them to see your painting over there. And you want them to look at that and not see anything else. So when you go through these museums, every once in a while you have this really great painting, a sergeant in the room in the corner, and then a lot of crap, and you just end up walking right up to the sergeant. Just because it's in a museum doesn't mean it's any good. But anyway, so you choose your central focal point, you choose that, and you say, that's what I want. And then what you do is you work your lights and stuff around it. So then what happens is that the center focal point is an effective light. So how you do that, now this is not necessarily our talk on putting together compositions, but when we do, we're going to be talking about compositions. Glass of water. Okay? The element of light. Because without light you have nothing. Now, a lot of my students, they end up, did you see what just happened?
Yeah.
You see? Nothing. Whoa!
Oh, okay.
This should be in the middle of your painting somewhere, and then what you do is you selectively go down. So I'm not there, but I would move it around till something, you see, I would take the light off of the back, and let's just say I want it like down in the middle here. I choose it down there, and I keep working with my light until I get what it is that I chose. So the part of the painting is that you're not a victim to what is. You choose it, and then you make it happen, whatever that is. But the element of light causes the painting to become something. We don't paint things, we paint effects. And so when I say we don't paint things, and you say you're a little confused about that. Well, you know, do I paint the glass or not? No, the glass is there because it is a prop. But it's the light, for the light to work on. So it's the light that's on the prop. And sometimes you have to kind of move it you do whatever you can to put the light wherever you want it. So, you know, it all depends on what kind of effect that you're after on that center focal point, and you just keep on moving it till you get that element of light. And a lot of artists have a hard time causing anything in their painting because they don't have a good setup. Now, with the lighting, this is all this information about this light you can get on my website, and you can go and find it. But the whole point is that you know, you have to have a light that gives you that. So that's one of the problems that you have on here. You didn't have a light that was flexible. Not your fault. Can't be responsible for what you don't know, and you don't know that you don't know it. That's why you're here. Okay, so remember I did this when I did okay, so with the element of light, remember the center focal point's in the middle of the painting. And see, we can actually bring the lighting effect into the middle of the painting. And with a little bit more adjustment, we could probably get it right towards the middle center area. And you see with that light in there, now the painting's got something. The Baumann effect basically is about getting light into your paintings. And we do that with value, and then we do it with temperature, which will be, you know, a huge conversation as we get into this whole thing. But the first thing is you have to determine what your center focal point is, and your center focal point has to be an effect. It has to be the light hitting the surface. And the glass is there obviously as a prop, because you can't just have the light there. So what were you thinking?
I like the way that shadow cascaded off of the glass, and then there was that little diamond kind of sparkle that just like was brighter than everything. And
Is that your central focal point?
Yes.
Yeah. So you see with that diamond, once you put that in, that is, but you could see it's down towards the middle of the canvas. You always want to make sure that's always in, you know, like your center focal point's always middle. Like when I look at you, you're like right in my middle. Now when you used to buy old cameras, they used to have a crosshair in the inside, and your mom would tell you, don't ever take a picture with a crosshair in the middle. Always, you know, find your main object to the left or to the right. But it's always within the middle third. And what's interesting when you start doing plein air painting, people go, well, can't you do that from a photograph? You kind of get, when you take a picture, you're doing the same thing. You're taking a picture, and the object is like right in the middle. But let's just say you were a lake, and I'm looking at you, and I take a picture of you. You're in the middle. That's my center focal point. Now, if I would paint the rest of the painting, the photograph, everything out there would actually be blurred, it would be arched. There's a lot of flaws in taking photography, and you don't know that until you're painting outdoors. But the difference between taking a painting and painting it outdoors and using a photograph of this exact scene is that when I move my eyes to the trees, now my focal point's here, and now there's no arching of camera lenses. My focal point is exactly the same as it is here. I can look over here and look at her. So when we go outdoors to paint, when we go outdoors to take pictures, the picture represents just this, and that's your experience. But if I'm standing on a vista, my experience is that, and then that, and then that, and that, and that. And the thing is, the camera doesn't render it that way. The camera renders it only this way. And so you don't get the same human experience or the reaction, the view, the perspective, as if we look at things like this. So when you're painting outdoors, my view is like this. I know my center focal point. I'm still working on that. But when I start working on this side and I start using you, my head turns. And now you're in the middle of my view. And now I'm painting that area of the painting with you being in the middle, and so on and so forth. So that's one of the big differences with painting outdoors, is that you actually are viewing the painting in segments as you're painting it, as opposed to the photograph that's just rendered with one idea in it. So it makes a whole different difference. And so you want to make sure you keep that center focal point up in the middle. Your object is off to the left. Now, compositionally, I don't know if that's really a viable composition. I think if you had the object more towards the center, maybe a little bit more smaller so it wouldn't be so overwhelming on this, and you had the light higher to create a little bit smaller shadow. We could have still had this highlight down here, but we would have had a little bit more concentrated painting, and not something that just kind of looked, if I look at this painting, because of the center focal point area, I say, oh, it kind of looks like a painting of a shadow. That's like the theme of the painting. I don't think that's really what we're after. We are after the effect, but somehow the effect needed to be in the middle somewhere. And that's always an effect of light. Color can be an effect, but it's not as strong as light. And we'll do that on the next homework assignment. We'll discuss a little bit about that. And there's still some elements that we'll discuss about creating that center focal point, because it's not just one thing that creates a focal point. There are many, many things that create a central focal point. The central focal point is usually created by light. It's not a thing, it's not a color. It's usually an effect of light. And to make it pop is the contrast, because one of the ways that we can actually create the effect of light is by putting it next to dark. It makes white whiter when you put it next to black. So it makes it brighter, and that's one way that we achieve that effect. Now the thing is, what you have to kind of get with the central focal point is our depth of field. When I look at you, I should choose somebody else. I keep picking on you. When I look at you, I can't see both your eyes at the same time. I can look at your left eye or I can look at your right eye. You try to do that with me. See, you can't see both eyes. You have to and if you talk to somebody that has a lazy eye, you just
Staring.
which eye do I look at? It's like, oh my God. It's so strong that we actually have a conversation in our head, look here, what do I look at? Especially we as human beings, and this is part of the Baumann Effect too, is that it is not enough to just paint a picture, but what's important is how do we receive that picture. That's equally, if not more so important, because you're trying to communicate. Remember, art is communication. So what's important is how are the people reading it, and you kind of have to learn a little bit about how people are made. So we as humans are right eye dominant. We see through our right eye. And therefore when I look at you through my right eye, you look back at me through your right eye. And that's a characteristic of being human, for the most part. If you got a bad eye, that's not going to work. And sometimes you have brain things that are different, but pretty much that's part of being a Homo sapien, is that we dominantly look at other people's right eye. And if that eye is a sleeper, we're kind of like, what do we do? But that's kind of how we see. And there's one creature on this earth that looks the same way as we do as humans. One creature. Dogs. Dogs have the same ability to look at us. When they look at us, they look through their right eye at us the same way we look at humans. And that's why we oftentimes humanize dogs. It's almost like they're talking to us. Now, how did that happen? It's not so much in the wolf culture, but in the dog culture. So what happened is that originally when tribes were walking around in the caveman area and the dogs were following behind eating, because they're scavengers, eating behind them, there were certain dogs that had a little bit more trait of that right eye dominance. And the people would go, oh, what a cute dog this one is. I'm going to take this one home. And they would take that dog home. That would breed with more dogs that were taken home for the same reason, because they look so cute and so human. And so because of that, we bred that part into them, because that's what we thought was attractive with dogs. Interesting, huh? So it's kind of important to kind of figure out that when you're trying to figure out if you're going to do a portrait, which eye you want to bring out. But we can't see both objects at the same time. Our depth of field is about this big, about the size of an egg. And so the central focal point should be about the size of an egg. Now when you pull the viewer out of all this stuff, if I'm looking at you, when I'm looking at you, and I see your dominant eye, you can look back at my dominant eye here, and just look at me. You'll notice that my collar is out of focus. My hands are out of focus. My feet are out of focus. In fact, the only thing that's really in focus is my eye, and my nose won't even be. Try to look at my nose, and it's a big nose, I know. But the thing is, my nose, and this is why portrait painting, people go, God, I can't do portraits. And there's always something wrong with the nose and the mouth. And that is because we don't see the nose and the mouth. Look at me. All you see is my eye. When you look at my nose, it's blurry. My mouth is even blurrier. But we have a tendency to try to make the nose look like a nose. And when you look at people's noses and stare at them, they start looking like pig noses. And teeth and mouths and stuff like that. If I stared at your teeth any longer, you would go, what do I have in my teeth? We don't look that way. We look directly in the eyes. So when you do a portrait, it's important to have that element in there. Some of these edges are harder than I like. So it looks a little photorealistic. And that's because when all the edges are hard like that, I'm like finding myself over here. Once I come over here, it's hard for me to come back. Part of a focal point also is that you have eye magnets in the painting that bring you back to the center focal point. And we're going to be talking about a lot of that stuff when we start putting together still lifes. But the key thing you've got to get for today is that the central focal point has to be an effect of light, not a thing. Like there's no thing here. It has to be an effect of light, no thing. It has the hardest edge next to it. It's about the size of an egg. It's about the size of an egg. It's somewhere in the middle of the painting. Focal points. The law of painting. You know what the law of painting is?
I'm not sure.
Mrs. Gugolinski, my idol. Paint what you see.
Oh, you've been telling me that.
I know. So then you don't go back and paint what you think you see. You have two elements. You paint what you see, and then you paint what you see. That doesn't mean you go fix something because you think it needs to be fixed.
The viewer, I think.
The viewer will look at it just the way you look at it, because we're all the same.
Okay.
So if you don't have anything there, it will read to them. In fact, it will read to the viewer that that's something wrong there, because under those circumstances, which as we go through life, we subliminally see, we can know when something's wrong. We see it. We can't verbalize it. We don't necessarily can bring it up and say that it's wrong, but we know when something's wrong. So when you paint what you see, you paint what you see. And it's interesting, you remember when we did the plastic cups? Were you there? If you take a bunch of plastic cups and you try to paint just the plastic little wedding cups that you get, oh my God, it's the hardest exercise because half of them just go away. And when you start outlining them, they don't look like the real thing anymore. But subconsciously, we know what they're supposed to look like. So you paint what you see, but then you paint what you see. That's not like fixing an edge to make it like, illustration. What you do is you pump it up, or you bring more romance into it. You bring, more light. So like Bierstadt's paintings are more romantic sunsets than just normal sunsets. He's still painting what he saw. He just amplified it. That's where the passion comes in, and we'll be talking about that too. Well, that was a lot of information about varnishing, and I guarantee you we are going to look further into the topic of focal points and edges. We're not done with that yet. I leave you tonight with some gorgeous vistas of our painting trips to Florence, Italy. Someday you might want to be able to join us, but in the meanwhile, please enjoy those wonderful vistas. If you'd like to get more information on what we are doing, you can go to our website at www.stefanbaumann.com. And while you're there, you can get information about our workshop, our podcast, Facebook, and coaching. And while you're there, subscribe for our free book, Everything I Know About Painting. If you'd like to participate in one of our workshops, just go ahead and give me a call at 415-606-9074. Oh, as I mentioned, we do have a podcast, and you can download that at your favorite place where you get your podcast. So till the next time we meet, always remember, don't step into your studio unless you plan to change the world. And always remember to paint with passion. I'm Stefan Baumann. You have a grand day.